Okay. So if you had one story you'd like to share with the internet, what do you think it would be?
I don't know. I have a bunch of good ones. Like the time I jumped out of the bar window and I landed on the dumpster, not in the dumpster, but on it, and then I rolled off and I hit the cactus. Or there's like the one where I was doing 130 miles an hour in Lampasas, Texas.
Okay, wait, what? Yeah, let's hear that one.
Okay, so this is back when I had the Tahoe, which is a truck. It's well, it's a ute or sports utility vehicle or whatever you want to call it, depending on where in the world you are and you're watching this. The one I had was originally a Z71 version of a 1995 Chevy two-door Tahoe. When I was done with it, it had aluminum heads on the engine because it came with cast iron ones, had electric water pump, had an electric radiator fan, had HEI ignition, had aluminum intake, it was a high performance intake too, that was hard to match to the heads, had catback exhaust, had headers, bunch of stuff. I never really messed with the throttle body on it because I wanted to stay emissions legal. Whereas if I had gone to a bigger one or changed it in any way, I would have violated emissions immediately. And I still had to test this car on emissions. You didn't just plug it in; you had to put it on a dyno and spin the rear wheels for 15 minutes in order to actually get the sticker that says, "Hey, you're street legal." It was a hard car once it got out of emissions, which it did at one time to get back into emissions because the cats and all that. Anyway, so at one point it had all that stuff on it, and I reached a wall in terms of performance. And then I decided to break that wall, which was a dumb idea, because here's what I did is I found the transmission on a GM truck, which is a slow transmission, was the limit. It was what slowed me down. And so it's on a 95 Chevy Tahoe 2-door 4x4 Z71, you have a 4L60E electromechanical transmission. They call it an electronic transmission. The only thing that's really electronic in it is the servos. It's still an OBD1 car, so you can't just plug in a module and tune the transmission under the hood to the tuning port. So instead what I did is I got a new valve body for the transmission and put that in there. And all of a sudden, it would throw your head back. It would shift quick. And then I got what's called a B&M Shift Plus electronic shift enhancer, which has the most repetitively redundant name for product that I've ever heard. All it does is it's a little switch that gives you economy mode, which is how the car regular drives, and sport mode, which basically means it shifts harder than it ever did with just the valve body, and then it also takes off the top speed limiter. So all of a sudden I'm in a truck that should be able to do at most like 90 to 100 miles an hour, and it'll do 130. And so I'm just driving along through Lampasas, Texas, just throttle to the floor, and I'm just looking at my speedometer, it's like hitting the needle on the 100, and it's just like, that's where it's stuck. And I'm just because my speedometer only goes up to 100, so I'm driving. Did this for about 4 hours going, how fast am I going? I don't know, it looks pretty, I'm looking at, this is really fast here, so I'm just looking around. I'm, in my mind, I'm like, this can't be 100 miles an hour, so, but I didn't know where the limit was yet. This is where I found out. So I'm driving, and this is where the new limit was. So I'm driving, and all of a sudden I'm passing through Lampasas, Texas, which is near Kerrville. It's on the way to Kerrville because I was working somewhere down there at the time as a photographer. And so I'm driving, and all of a sudden I go, isn't there a cop in Lampasas? Oh, there he goes. I guess he's pulling me over. Oh, we're back there. Mexico's not that far. Okay, I'll pull over. And so I slowly hit the brakes, and I scoot over to the side, and it decelerates. That way I'm not slamming the brakes and then flipping. It's a tall vehicle because it's 4x4, so I pull over. Get out, or I don't get out, but I sit there, and the cop gets out of his car. He comes walking over to the side of the truck, and I roll down the window because I've got electric windows, thank God. So I roll him down, I go, what's the matter? And he goes, can I see your license and registration? I go, yeah, here, and I pull it out of my wallet, and I give it to him, and I give him my insurance. And he's just sitting there with a notepad, and he's taking notes. He goes, what is this? And I go, it's a 95 Tahoe. And he goes, it has 2 doors. And I go, yeah. He goes, did you build this yourself? I go, no, it came from the factory like this from Mexico. So that's where they built them at the time. He goes, and he just keeps writing. walks around the car, bends down, looks underneath it, stands back up, keeps writing notes, comes back around my window, and he says, so I caught you doing 130. I'm like, just real happy all of a sudden. He walks back to the squad car, and first he says, I gotta check on some stuff, and so he walks back to the squad car, and he gets his ticket book out, and he's trying to figure out what exactly this calculates out to. Does it calculate out to speeding with a high fine? Does it calculate to just regular speeding? Does it calculate to excessive speeding? Does it count as, I think it's attempted manslaughter because of like public endangerment or something? And so he's sitting there, he's trying to figure all this out, and he comes back, and one thing he wanted to investigate is whether or not I was actually driving a street legal vehicle. And so he asked me to pop the hood, and I pop it, and he looks under there. I'm still sitting in the driver's seat, and we're just shouting back and forth at each other across the hood of the car, which is it's a big truck, so it's got a long hood. So he's like, that looks stock. I'm like, yep. Closes the hood, walks around again, gets on the radio back in the squad car for a second, comes back, and he's like, okay, so I'm writing you a ticket for 130 miles an hour. And before he hands it to me, he goes, and by the way, we don't like your kind in this town. I go, okay. So I know I'm in trouble. And so he hands me the ticket, and so I'm looking at it, and he's like, I need you to sign here, which is typical in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So I sign it. It doesn't say I'm guilty, it just says I've received this ticket. And I don't know what happens if you don't sign that, but some old lady got tased a couple of years ago for not signing it, which didn't make any sense anyway. So she signs it, or I sign it, hand it back to him. He gives me my copy. I'm sitting there, I'm looking at it. It's an excessive speeding charge. It's a ticket for $1,000.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and so he says to me, though, while I was standing there, he goes, okay, so I caught you at 130, and I'm looking at your speedometer, and it only goes up to 100. Even though I have my radar gun checked out, I'm thinking something's wrong here. So in 3 months, when you got to pay this, because here's the date on the ticket, I went to, it wasn't the judge, it was the Justice of the Peace. He pointed me at where he was downtown. The name of the guy was on the ticket, and I've got it over here. And so I show up 3 months later, walk in, and the Justice of the Peace is super busy. First of all, he's got a different office than the cop said, but so he's super busy. And I ask him what's going on and how is he doing, Your Honor, and he says, doing fine. I'm really busy right now because I've only been on the job for a month, and I'm trying to figure this out. And I go, so hand him the speeding ticket. He calls in the constable or whoever it was that pulled me over. I think it was a state trooper who's around. We wait about 15 minutes for him to show up. He shows up, and so we go back and forth. Because it's Justice of the Peace, you don't need a jury. You don't necessarily need lawyers around either. But I gotta choose. I gotta say either I need a lawyer or I gotta represent myself. And I had to pick one. So I was just there. And I was like, I'm just gonna represent myself because it's kind of late in the game to get a lawyer. Long story short, we came out. We looked under the hood of the truck. They verified it was the same truck by looking at the license number, the VIN number, all this other stuff, my insurance card, and my driver's license. They pop the hood. The judge sits there and he goes, "That looks stock." I'm like, "Yep." And so we pull up the internet,
That wasn't
compares
stock.
the photos, and goes, "Yep, that looks stock." And after a while, we do a little bit more research on the internet, and the state trooper's like, "Yeah, I don't think my gun's right." He's just straight up. He's like, "That doesn't make physical sense for it to be 130 in a vehicle that heavy." And which I agree with partially, but there's some telling other things here that say he was that his radar was probably right. And so, they knocked it down to the highest speed my car will do, which is probably illegal. They probably should have had to catch me speeding again to ticket me again. Instead, they just ticketed me again at a lower speed.
What was the speed?
It was, according to this...
Here, about paperwork.
Yeah, it is, the alleged speed was brought down to 90 miles an hour. And so if you want to look at that...
Right, there's no information on there you don't want people seeing, right?
Does it have my social security number or anything? No. Unless it's pretty faded.
Alright, well, we'll see if we can see.
Okay, well, if we got it, we'll take a still and we'll blur it out or something with Photoshop. So they brought it down to a 90 mile an hour speeding ticket instead of a 130 mile an hour speeding ticket. But what's really telling, if I can get this to fire up. This is the GPS I have. It's a little Garmin unit. It says, yes, he says Garmin as it's starting up.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if it'll fire up real fast, but it won't. Because the batteries in these... This thing's like 6 years old. It's kind of slow.
That's okay.
Yeah, the new ones are much faster. A little faster. Anyway.
So what became of they knocked it down to 90, how much
brought it down from $1,000 to $300.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And
that is just ridiculous.
It was, but at the same time, it was much more affordable, and I wasn't going to argue with it. That's what it said. That's how fast it says I was going.
That's your max speed?
That's. I have not messed with that top score ever because of how high it is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so...
So the cop didn't notice that you had that on you, though?
It was center console.
Alright, well...
He didn't feel like bugging it. I don't know.
Good thing?
Yeah, I guess. I got lucky. But, so that's how I got... I mean, at the end of the whole ordeal, the judge looks at me and goes, "Son, are you a lawyer?" I'm like, "No." And he's like, "You should be." I go, "Never became a lawyer, but have a degree that should get me in." And that's the story.
Cool. Thank you for sharing.
Okay. Bye.